it's already kind of a boring sport, right? Like you go forward, you come back, you go forward, you come back. Like there's no moves. There's nothing really going on. Like, and so like, a little bit of drama would be sick.
I blacked out. I don't know. That's how you debate. What happened? I don't even know. What did I say? I'll watch the tape.
Show me somebody who's never failed, and I'll show you somebody who's slow. Right? Show me somebody who PRs on every erg test, and I'll show you somebody with a really bad erg score.
Okay, when I first started the sport of rowing, no one told me this, and this is like the number one misunderstanding I had. I thought
I'm Alex Del Sordo, and I'm here. Another Coach is Yelling. You see some familiar faces and some faces that are rowing legends happening here in the United States today. But this is episode 15, and I have two of the founding members with me today of the first ever Coach is Yelling. Before we even started, we can't believe that we're at number 15 already. Now, this is no different. If you like or dislike what these people have to say, send us your feedback. Give us your comments. Okay. I think we're going to be talking about some training aspects to rowing. And I think that everyone's going to have an opinion here today. We're going to start with an intro, like I always do here. I got Mike Wallin, the ED of Chicago Rowing Foundation. This guy's won, I don't know how many Coaches Yellings at this point, but he's up against a wall today with some serious rowers. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be back. It's actually warm in Chicago, and I've been allowed out of my house a couple times. It's fun, feeling good.
And I think you might be undefeated sleeveless. So the force is with you today, man.
I'm in my true form.
That's right. Next up, this guy, the Grace family. Okay, if you're a rower in the United States, you know who this guy is. 2010 Trinity grad, soccer and rowing. So we got like this dual sport thing. He's been to the World Championships since 2014. Never really won it outside of the U.S. So John, come on, man, you got to pick up the pace here for the United States. Yeah. But you won the Lotman Challenge, and you've won a ton of rowing races here in the United States. Welcome to our show.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. This is great. I'm in Boston right now, and trying to get back into things after a little COVID break from training, and this is sweet to be around some rowers and talk rowing.
Well, we're going to talk about rowing quite a bit, and welcome to the show. Next up, I'm going to warn you three gentlemen here. Grace has the same name as my daughter, so she already is like number one for me today, and Luke knows how this works. Okay, he's up against it. Grace Ludzak, let's see her, 3-time world champion, Olympic rower, hopefully going to be in the 2021 Olympics, NCAA championship. You do nothing but win. Welcome to the show.
Well, I also decided to rock sleeveless today, so game on.
Gun show. Well, welcome to the show. I hope you're excited to go up against these guys here. Again, two of them have competed quite a bit in our competition. But
always respect your competition.
Oh, I like that. Now, next up, the last time he was on, he won. The founder of Rower Academy. This guy, Cal Bear, just like Wallin over there, has been in the Olympics. This guy knows rowing inside and out. Luke Walton, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. And yes, I do know how this works. So thank you for gifting me one win so that you can invite me back to use me what you traditionally use me for, to have me finish somewhere in the middle to the back of the pack. So I imagine that's where I'll end up today, but we'll see.
We'll see. Now, listen, these are topics you know very well. Okay, now we're going to get right into it with Mike Wallin. We're going to start with him, the guy that has been on the show many times. The question for you, Mike, and let me get my clock ready too. What is the biggest difference between training high school athletes and college athletes? What is the biggest difference? You are on the clock.
I'm sad to be going first because I know that you guys are going to say volume, and that's something that should be true but isn't always true. My high school team of St. Joe's Prep outvolumed many college teams, and I think they still do. They certainly outvolumed the work we did at Cal. I think one of the biggest issues is they're not with their parents anymore. They don't have mom and dad at home. They're not going home to a familiar place. They don't have their dinner, and all that stuff planned out for them. They don't have, governance over their decision-making process, and that can be a positive or negative thing. their bodies are a lot different. There's not going to be a lot of physical changes from a 20 to 21-year-old versus a 15 to a 16-year-old. I mean, kids can grow 5 inches in a summer. And that, that's a big part of the reason why the volume should be lower in high school across the board. And then the other thing, the athletes are grouped with people similar to them. In high school, you're subject to your school or your area. When you go to a program, typically the other recruits are of the same ability level. So that can make or break a lot of people, especially if you were the alpha dog back home. Now you're with all the other alpha dogs, and some people are going to thrive and get faster from that environment. Other people are going to completely break down, not be able to handle it.
You always know how to end before 90 seconds. I love it. Now, guys, listen, John, you're up next. You have to speak clearly, confident, and quickly in 90 seconds. He did it in 1:15. John, you're on the clock here. Ready? I'm going to repeat the question. What's the difference between high school training and college training? You're on the clock.
I mean, I've never met Mike before, but I think that was just a fantastic answer. I know this is not going to get me any points, but Mike really hit a lot of nails on the head. So my number one thing was going to be parents. Like, you don't have your parents in college, and like, that is honestly the biggest thing. And I think you just don't realize in high school how much they do for you, and how much outside of the boathouse, logistics are taken care of. Everything's taken care of, nutrition, sleep. All those things are not in your control. Like, they're taken care of for you. And then all of a sudden you're on a college campus, and all of a sudden you control the things outside of training that help you get faster. And that's a really big challenge as a freshman coming into a new environment. And I think also there's probably a bigger disconnect between you do more training in college compared to more training and less racing in college, I would say. And in high school, you do maybe less training and more racing, which is a little more fun. And so I think you have to be really you kind of have to fall in love with the sport a little bit and enjoy the process a little bit more, or learn how to, because, you have to, I think grinding through winter training is kind of, at least for me, like going to college was the first time I had to train through the winter. And that was a big change.
Time. Now, when you get timed out, John, you get muted. So you're done talking. Not bad. I mean, you scored 4 points to Mike's 6, but again, going first, you kind of have your advantage. Grace, you're in now. So NCAA champion. I know you rode in high school. You're at the Olympic level. What is the biggest difference between high school training and the college training experience? You're on the clock.
Summing it up in one word, it's just more. I rode in a public high school, and then rode at University of Michigan, and then at Stanford. You really have to, like everyone's been saying, you become in charge of everything. You're the time management keeper. You're in charge of your nutrition. You're in charge of, figuring out the time, commuting to practice, bringing all your clothes with you, timing out, making sure you get all your homework done, that you can stay up late for the group projects, scheduling that nap in the middle of the day. But all in all, going to college and rowing there, you have the opportunity to go faster. It's more training. There's more on your plate, but honestly, rowing in college for me was so amazing because you meet all these incredible driven people within your sport. And then you have the opportunity to balance back and forth. And rowing practice itself kind of adds in that structure. So I think people definitely should consider that if they're thinking about rowing in college. And if you're a junior rower, make sure that you start communicating with coaches now, fill out questionnaires, start talking to people. You can reach out to people like myself and John on Instagram. Sorry, John, I just offered you up. But definitely consider that. And I think it's a great decision to row in college.
I'm going to stop you there. So something to think about is the intensity of the practice higher or lower versus college or high school, thing to think about. And I think a lot of these high school kids that are watching want to know this. Luke, coming in cleanup here, number 4, you deal with this on a daily basis, training these athletes at Rower Academy. Let's bring Luke off. Luke, you know the question. You're on the clock.
Yeah, I think everybody covered some really, really good points here. And, Mike and I agree that volume, done right, volume is a serious difference maker between what's happening in college. what's happening in high school, and when to apply that and when people are ready. And Mike alluded to it, but, you know, we actually did less volume at Cal than a lot of other programs, and we were successful in doing it. So volume, you know, that's one thing. But I'd also say the commitment level, like we always talk about in high school, there's sort of three basic buckets, right? You have those athletes that are there that really, really want to be there. Then you have those that are like, this is something fun and interesting to do. And yet another bucket would be mom and dad are going crazy, get out of the house, you've got to go do something. And we all know who those rowers were if we rowed in high school. So when you get up into the collegiate level, it's much more, this is your commitment. You're there 4 years, see it through. This is a priority, and you're balancing it with your academics. You know, it's student athlete. It's always student first, but they're really kind of inseparable when you're trying to compete at a collegiate level. And so I think that's one of the things. You're not missing practices. You're not, you know, taking vacations with the family. You're not doing a lot of those things. When you make a commitment to row at the collegiate level, you're committed to row at the collegiate level. And I think that's one of the biggest differences. So volume and commitment level, I think, are the two major things that's a difference jumping from high school to college.
Man, Walton, you really, ever since getting married, my man, you've really just eased out. I love it, man. Smooth criminal. Talking about that, I really like it and I appreciate it. You brought the heat. You were dead even with Wallin.
Wow.
Graves in distant fourth with 4 points. Grace, you got one extra point, again, just because you share the name of my daughter. But we're going to get right back into Luke Walton here, okay? So your second question is, and I like this question a lot, what can high school or college coaches be doing better to prepare athletes to attempt the Olympic cycle? So what can we do as high school and college coaches to better prepare our athletes to be at that Olympic cycle and be Olympic ready? You are on the clock.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of it is about, from a coach perspective, is being able to identify talent and being able to identify where on the spectrum that talent is. And so there are things beyond straight up making the U19, the U23, or the senior national team. And, you know, it's about development camps. It's about high performance camps. It's about encouraging athletes who are not yet ready at whatever level it is, junior, U23, or senior, to find ways to continue to better themselves throughout specifically the summertime outside of the program, so that they're continuing along their trajectory. And there are stories and stories that, you know, it's an exception if a U19 athlete goes on to make the Olympic team. That's not the rule, right? In my mind, it's just not. And so knowing that, it's about trying to figure out where people are along the spectrum. And there were guys that went to U23s, never made a U23 team, went on and won a gold medal in 2004. So, you know, coming from smaller programs, not necessarily Princeton or Washington or Cal, but coming out of Ohio State or Virginia or things along those lines. So I think it's about identifying talent and really keeping avenues open for athletes to participate and better themselves along the spectrum, so that when they're ready to be part of a senior team or a U19 or U23, they can go and participate there.
Time, not bad. I really like that, identifying the talent. I think the U.S. system does a very poor job of that, and I'm just going to say it right now. I just don't think that we do a great job. Grace, we're going to bring you in now. As someone that has worked her way up to the Olympic level, what can high school or college coaches be doing better to get their athletes ready for the Olympic cycle and training? You're on the clock.
Well, I think you have to look at how other countries operate to start off, and how we do it within our sport of rowing within the U.S. and then also other sports. When you think about tennis or skiing in the high school level, there are some high school programs where the academics are combined with the sport early on, like skiing up in New Hampshire. There are specific prep schools where kids will go to focus on their sport, thinking about that Olympic dream. Same goes for tennis down in Florida. And when you think about other countries, China, Romania have similar systems where they'll identify talent at an early age. I'm not sure that's a system that really works well within the US, because I mean, sometimes kids are like plucked out and don't really have the opportunity to explore different sports. But here for us, I think along the lines of what Luke was saying, recruiting and developing, I was listening to Rowing in Color this morning, another podcast. And I think that recruiting, we have so many amazing athletes here in the US, and picking up on making rowing a more diverse sport. Our Shea Cooper talked about going to churches to recruit. And I think thinking of more innovative ways to get people interested in rowing, seeing, more people of color in the sport, I think is a good way to go.
Man, you touched on it perfectly. I know that's going to be a point Mike's going to bring up here soon. It's not necessarily identifying the talent. It's getting more talent in our little sport of rowing. We just don't have a lot, right? It's not a national sport. We're ranked 55th as the most popular sport. It drives me crazy, someone who's in the industry all the time. John, we're going to bring you on here. I'd love to get your point of view. Now, listen, you have to make up at a minimum 4 points. All right, you're behind the 8 ball, buddy boy. John, you know the question. You're on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that broader talent pool is always needed and better identification is needed. But I think if you're talking about using the athletes we have at the moment, I think it's really important, like as a country, we could do a much better job of technical development on a national level and having more of a national style that, if you look at any German junior rower or British junior rower or Dutch junior rower, there's a style that they're taught at a very young age that once they're brought up into U23s, into seniors, that you get in a boat with any guy and you know exactly what you're trying to do technically. And in my opinion, that's where the, fractions of a second start adding up and where we're missing things at the moment. So I really think that could be taught from a very young age, and just there can't be so many different schools of thought on how to move a boat if we're going to be successful at the highest level. It has to be more uniform. And then secondly, I think body balance and injury prevention stuff is the most important thing as far as retention of athletes. And you can have the most talented guys, but until we're teaching junior athletes how to take care of their bodies and college athletes how to take care of their bodies and stay healthy through the the rigors of
time. John, you're on a roll. I just want to give you more time, but dude, you brought up an interesting point, and I don't know how I feel about it. It's a more nationalized style of rowing. I don't know how that's going to be really difficult, given the size of our country and the diversity that we do have in our sport. But I do like where your head's at a little bit. I guess a question that I need you to think about as you're off air here is, do we need to pull, you did 2 sports in college, do we need to pull more athletes from other sports? Like soccer's a fall sport. Do we get more kids that are soccer players into our sport for year-round training? Think about that. But Mike, you're up now. This is a topic that you and I have talked about extensively together. You know the question. You're on the clock.
All right, so we'll start with the high school coach. I don't think there's a lot you can do in terms of X's and O's to create Olympians. Your high school accolades, like Luke mentioned, are not a direct path to the Olympics. Some of that's just because the field gets more competitive and deep, and some of it is because of what you shouldn't be doing as a high school coach, which is overtraining kids, burning kids out. You need to make it fun. You need to make it fast, teach them the mechanics, and get them excited about the sport. You want enthusiasm in the sport, and you want to bring as many athletes into the sport. Just because you're rowing doesn't mean you're an athlete. Just because you're playing a sport doesn't mean you're an athlete. You want to make this engaging for real athletes. I think the college level becomes a little closer to the pipeline. I think the amount of hours you can train in the NCAA are there for a reason. That helps protect the burnout. But one thing I want to touch on is the relationship between the national team and the coaches. That rapport has to be one of trust and one of belief. I trust Chris Chase and Casey Galvanic. So CRF kids are going to support the national team. If my kids were coming home saying they were hurt and overtrained, I wouldn't send my kids there. Want to read a quote for you guys that I got from a girl who rowed for my program and then just recently came out of the U23 program talking about their coach, Kevin Sowers. She said, I wrote this down. She said, "It's rare to row for somebody who's that good of a coach, while at the same time such a genuinely great person. He pushed me hard, but at no point in time did I not feel he genuinely cared about me and my well-being more than the result." And for anyone who thinks that's a soft way to think about it, they won the last 2 summers. They won 2 bronzes and a gold. So it's not like they were out there being all hokey. They were kicking butt. if my athlete's coming back from a national team program like that, I'm going to say 100% go back. I want to support you going.
Time, man. Wallin, nice work. I gave an extra 10 seconds because you did read a really great quote from an athlete, and we all want to hear what athletes have to say. Luke's laughing, but I had to give it to him.
I had 10 seconds to spare from the first round.
That's true. So when we get back from work for our sponsors, we're going to see who moves on and who doesn't. So stay tuned here in a couple seconds. And we're back now. Off the commercial break, we acknowledge that John is just losing right now, and he tried to bow out a little bit, and then Grace said, "I'll bow out." We're going, no. This is a competition, okay? So we're keeping everybody on, and we addressed it. The old dogs, air quotes here, if you're listening to the podcast version of this, is Luke. Luke and Mike were training in the late 90s, early 2000s at a very, very high level. Luke went on to race at the Olympics, and John and Grace are doing it right now. So, guys, in this Coaches Yelling, the format's fairly simple. We're going to put on the clock about 4 or 5 minutes. This is us at a bar having a conversation. And I want to talk about what can we do in the U.S. to improve on our Olympic system. But let's talk about the differences of the 90s, late to early 2000s, and then today. Like John, specifically, you're on your own in Boston, right? Kind of training on your own. Grace is in a system in Princeton. Like those are two distinct differences, yet you're still representing the U.S. on our own Olympic team, or hopefully Olympic team and national team. So I'm going to start the clock, guys, and the floor is open. Let's do it. Let's go. Let's start talking.
Well,
Mike?
I should probably clarify that I'm actually currently very, very lucky to be training with the Jevi group, Jevi and Company, in Boston, and I think they're a very good. Part of the reason I've enjoyed training with them so much is because of I think Jevi and her dad Greg's the type of group they've put together over all the lessons they've learned over the course of Jevi's career, and I think that was something I was going to touch on, was that I've been very fortunate to have 2 older brothers that have rode at the elite level and made mistakes and had successes, and I think one thing I wanted to say was that I think as long as you're honest and paying attention and deciding to learn from your mistakes, you can always improve. And I think that's something that I really enjoy about the sport, and I think something that Jevi is particularly great at is that you might lose a race, you might not be where you want to be, but if you're learning a lesson from that and then coming back home and tweaking things a little bit, changing the training a little bit, or changing how you're rowing a little bit to find a little bit of improvement, like that's how you get faster. And I think as long as you're honest and kind of like open to making changes, like you'll never go backwards.
How does that compare, Luke, to the 2000s, like the early?
Well, I love it. I love the statement that's just made, because like if you want to sum it up in like just a soundbite, it's failure isn't fatal, right? It's just sort of learning to fail is an integral process of becoming a better rower. And I think we were talking a little bit off air. What is it to be a high school rower and make the jump to college? And a lot of that is putting yourself out there and being aware that there are no guarantees. There's no guarantee in the recruiting process. There's no guarantee in making the varsity. There's no guarantee in making an Olympic team. There's no guarantee in winning a medal. And it's how far do you want to extend yourself, and how much risk do you want to take working to get a reward? What does that look like? So, failure isn't fatal, I think is a big thing to help high school athletes recognize that, in moving forward, you're going to have to do some things that might have a potential for failure or a potential for success based on how you approach them.
Luke, I'll take you one up. I think failure is necessary.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I was cut from the 2012 team, and I think everyone at some point in their life has lost, maybe once, and each of those failures, I think, provide an opportunity to get faster. Every time you level up, you start at the junior rowing, move your way up to college, move your way up if you're pursuing the national team. You have to have two things. You have to have the passion and the talent. And without either of those, you can't move up to the next level. I think earlier when we were talking about burnout, that passion piece, I think, is something that you can reignite. And John was talking about mixing it up with a different training group, finding that right chemistry is really important. And I think that's something that's probably held true, early rowing to training today. But big differences too. I mean, what's critical for me in my training, we talked about this during the break, is being on top of your physical prep and mental prep. In Princeton, we have access to a physical therapist that we can see once or twice a week. And that is huge. Doing like yoga and a little bit of cross training is something that I've learned as I've gone up in the sport. It's really important that I stay on top of body work. Do like a big warm up, like 30 minutes of warm up, do like a 10-minute jog, some dynamic body work when I was a high schooler, I have no idea. I would take off. I was in Michigan, we'd be running in the freezing cold, and I'd take off my winter jacket and I'd just start running, and we'd do our cross training, and then I'd put it back on and jump back in the car, and that would be it, and just get back to homework. So I think that the prep, you have more time once you devote your life to training for the Olympics, and you figure out what are those areas that you can tweak.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're not, being comfortable with failure, absolutely. Show me somebody who's never failed, and I'll show you somebody who's slow, right? Show me somebody who PRs on every erg test, and I'll show you somebody with a really bad erg score. I mean, the better you get, the more you have to flirt with that. I heard a story about Jake Wetzel that really broke my heart, which was that he would go on the erg, and this was while we were in college, me and Luke both erg next to this guy a bunch. Once a week, he would just pick a workout that he was going to fail on, not telling any of us this. And he would intentionally just see how bad he could get in the middle of a piece and how he would react. And he was doing that on his own in secret. Meanwhile, that was the one day a week I would beat Jake on the erg. So I was going home super excited that I beat Jake on the erg. And then I find out years later that he was basically just toying with all of us. Yeah, and I'd like to see a little more structure around the issues we're talking about. High school level, what do you do? Junior level, what do you do? College level, what do you do? I feel like so much of what we get is, an article from an Olympian, and it's really fun to read, but it just doesn't really apply to a 16-year-old. And if our job is to get more athletes in the sport, you got them splitting hairs, worried about these things that are, deciding the difference between an Olympic bronze and fourth place, when in reality, that's not really that relevant to their development level. It's not really that relevant to the lesson they need to be learning now. And that is just, hey, let's love this sport. Because if you're going to get to the Olympics, you've got a long way to go. No one hops out of the CRF varsity 8 and hops right into USA. That doesn't happen.
John, let me ask you this, John. If you didn't have your two brothers that guided you and you got to watch them go through that, how would you have known what to do in training and where to go and how to get yourself prepared to the level that you're rowing? That's kind of what I'm talking about. I'm wondering, what do we need to do as coaches to prepare our athletes? Because we're not all lucky enough to have the background that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say if, without them, I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, and definitely not doing to the level or degree at which I'm doing it. And I think, I think that's something that happens gradually over time, is building off of those experiences. And you're absolutely right that, not everyone has that. And I think, I don't know. I think having a more, for me growing up, I love soccer. For me, I looked up to, the best players in the world. And I think for me, I was always so motivated having, learning from people's example. And I think that's one of the most powerful things you can have as a high school or middle school athlete, is seeing someone who's doing it the right way, and coaches having a model, a model athlete, who they can point to and say hey, this guy's rowing the way we want you to row. He's taking care of his body in the way that we want you to. And then they can say oh, wow, that's so cool. Grace is, wow, she's a Olympian, or she's an Olympic medalist. Wow, that's how I want to act and how I want to carry myself. And I think at least for me, that's always been kind of the most powerful way to get through to an athlete. And I think kind of takes care of, like maybe it's not, you don't have an older brother, but you do have someone, just a role model to,
we just don't do that as a sport. I look back at it like we don't do a great job of that, of identifying the path you should take or could take, and or promoting the athletes that are doing it and using them as examples. Like we all know who the best soccer players are, and we know their paths because they're publicized about it all the time.
Right. I think we could do, I think national team athletes, we could do a better job of being more open about things that have worked for us or haven't worked for us, and having, working with, or maybe it's US rowing, like having an avenue for that type of conversation to happen more often.
Well, I want to sort of redirect this with Luke and Grace. So, we talked about the transition from high school to college. What has been the one biggest thing that was different from college to the Olympic level of training, aside from the passion and the skill? Like, what is the biggest change?
Well, I'd want to answer that question, but I kind of want to go back to just what we were talking about. We were talking about kind of coming up in the generation that Wallin and I rode in. We didn't talk about our feelings. We didn't talk about how we felt about it. We didn't talk about what we were dealing with internally. And now that's something that has advanced and something that's come to the forefront of training young men and women in this day and age. And I think it's an important conversation. But I also think if we're talking about what high school coaches can do to help their high school athletes, it's to understand that the world is a place with hard edges, and to dive into the mental and emotional wellness of their athletes and work with them to equip them with the tools necessary to deal with the real world. And one of the things that I always talk to parents about is how beautiful is rowing, that it's a sport with all these life lessons, hard edges, black and white, wins and losses. There are no superstars. You don't lose a race and say, but I pull 5:55, so I'm a great rower. You win with your team, you lose. Time management, the list kind of goes on and on. And how beautiful is it that high school athletes can engage this and learn these lessons that then they can take into the real world? And I think we've joked about it in previous shows, and if we haven't, you get to the real world and you look around and you realize, wait, not everybody's in my corner supporting me, like not everybody wants to see me succeed. And so I think as high school coaches, we can have a profound effect working with athletes to identify what their insecurities are or their hangups that are preventing them from, like we said, reaching to fail and accepting failure as a possibility. And then how do we help promote that and develop a skill set so when they get to the collegiate team, they're able to compete. Like Mike was saying earlier, some people thrive in that environment, some people wash out. And now to answer your question, what is it to jump to, Olympic training? It's sink or swim. It's sink or swim. You're there, you are competing against the very best athletes in the nation. There are very few spots. Everybody wants them. You're all going after the same thing. And it's about what can you do to continue to move forward in that environment. And one of the things that Carrie Simmons talks about all the time is big picture mentality. Big picture. You don't live and die by every result. It's big picture. What are you doing to continue to move yourself forward? So as high school coaches, what can we do to equip athletes to have a better big picture understanding, to be able to deal with insecurities, hang up, and failure so that they can continue to move forward and they can truly understand where they finish. I joked about the fact that I was a mid-level Olympic guy. I'm so comfortable with that because that was the best I was going to do. And I can tell everybody right now, today, that was it. That was my pinnacle. And I know that because I pushed myself as much as I could. I extended as far as I could. And that's where I ended up. And I'm fine with that. Would I have loved a medal? Sure. Who doesn't want a medal? Did I deserve it? Nope. Am I okay with that? Yes. That's what it's about. At any level, high school, college, Olympic level, that's what it's about.
Luke, you're killing it right now. I didn't want to interrupt you. I mean, you're just on a roll right now. But, just for people listening, Grace, can you please, from a women's perspective, from what you're doing, like with that team, with the national team there, what is the biggest difference from the Stanford to the upper level Olympic training? Like, what was the big change that you noticed?
Okay, when I first started the sport of rowing, no one told me this, and this is like the number one misunderstanding I had. I thought that the more you trained, like the easier it would feel, and like you just get faster and you get more fit, and all of a sudden 2Ks would be painless. So heads up, that's not true. You just get to go faster. But I think so I did the U23 team when I was in college, and actually was on the national team, and took a semester from afar. And raced with the US team down in New Zealand. But the difference between doing like a part-time stint with the US squad versus full-time training, all of a sudden, everything is focused on rowing. Like you have morning until night, it's like your nutrition, your recovery, your prep, and you don't necessarily have that balance with having another thing going on, because practice times will change. I mean, I know the men's team, like they have the opportunity to have a full-time job when practice is set up that way. It's not necessarily that way on the women's team, but I mean, the women's team is very successful. Like I think putting all your eggs in one basket, and still having some mental balance with some of that, that's a big shift.
My hat goes off to everyone at the national level. I don't know, John, Grace, I don't know how you do it. I mean, it's impressive. You're representing the country very well. I could never do what you're doing. That's just something I could never commit to. After a word from our quick sponsor here, we're going to identify the winner, and we're going to say our final goodbyes. So more from us in a couple seconds.
Hey guys, it's Luke from Rower Academy, where we give you the information, tools, and training you need to successfully navigate the college recruiting process. Check us out at roweracademy.com and start training for your future today.
We're back, and I'm not going to delay this. And Luke, you win. And you win because you redirected the conversation. You did a fantastic job identifying and answering every question. And I know you keep thinking that you're like the back of the pack guy. No. You're secretly moving your way into these victories. Your back-to-back victories. Congratulations today. But in fourth, our final goodbyes, John Graves. John, first time on the show. I hope to have you back. Closing conversation here, man. You got 20 seconds to say your final words.
Yeah, I mean, this has been super fun. I did want to dovetail into what Luke was talking about and just saying that, like, I totally agree with, like, his philosophy in general, just as far as, like, if there's one thing we can impart to anyone pursuing rowing, whether they have Olympic aspirations or not, it's just, like, that, like, the pursuit of quality and your potential and just, like, bringing quality to everything you're doing is something that, whether it's in rowing or anything else, is something that will really benefit like any community you're involved with. So like, yeah, I really believe in just like, yeah, Luke, you never won the Olympics and I don't think I will either, but the pursuit of my potential is something that I think that pursuit in general is something that will bring a lot of great stuff out of you. And yeah, just like, it's not just one thing. It's like, the pursuit of more wholesome approach to just like your absolute best. So I think that's
wonderful. And I really hope the people that are watching can learn something from what you just said. Admitting that you probably won't win the Olympics, but you just love the journey. It's a big deal, man. And I think that's what most rowers feel anyway. In a very close third, Grace Ludzak, you did a great job today. Last words here. Go ahead.
Well, I think I just want to tell like all junior rowers and college rowers, definitely like continue to develop that passion, connect with your teammates. I know right now it's pretty hard because everyone's training separately and probably on Zoom calls, connecting by the erg. So just reach out, connect with each other. That's the big part of rowing, is the teamwork and the camaraderie. So I think continue to connect and try and bring more people into our sport. If you've got friends in college and your classes that are looking for something to do, bring them into the sport and have them give it a try.
Well, like you said earlier too, you listened to the Rowing in Color podcast, and that's a great start. And I love that you promoted them here today and talked about them. You're listening to it. I completely agree with you on that. In second, Mike Wallin. I mean, look, you had the victory going into the last statement until Luke closed it out, and you didn't even try to stop him.
He walked through. Hey, he was doing great work, man. I couldn't. It was like the 2001 or 2002 trials in the 4, right, Luke? When you walked through me. Okay.
Yep.
No, I don't know if this was one of our more entertaining shows, but I think it was one of the most helpful ones. Thank you guys for saying what you're saying. Grace talking about all that extra training doesn't make it. I just think juniors in general need that message. So many of them hear what an Olympian's doing and then try to jump right to that step, and it's not the right progress. You gotta level up in the right way. And to Luke's point, and to the coaching style, I think understanding your athletes and knowing what they need is absolutely a necessary quality in a good coach today. You can't have that 90s model of everybody get on board and shut up and do it. It just doesn't work. Like, the athletes don't respond to that, and you need to look at them as individuals and assess what they need and how to develop them. I really hope people from coaching and athletes can take a lot away from that. And I've seen it work as a coach, so I'm fully behind it. And great job to Luke.
Well, thank you, Mike, and great job to you. But Luke Walton, the winner, I love it. Go ahead, man. You carried us through the last round. Let's hear it.
I mean, I'm always amazed when I win. This is my second win. I have a tremendous amount of losses on this show, if you will, but I guess that, speaks to what we've been talking about all along in this show, which is just the consistent pursuit of the craft, right? You keep showing up. You asked me to be on the show, I'm here. I'm just not like, oh, I've lost it so many times, I'm not showing up, and I'm super competitive. Like, I want to be here to win. It's why we're here. So I think that's one thing is you need to be persistent, pursue your craft daily, and come off the water each day. As Gladstone would say, come off the water each day with no regrets. No regrets. All you can do is all you can do on that day. Give everything you have, put it away, do it again tomorrow, and you'll find out just how far you can go in rowing. And you can be certain wherever you end up, that's where you're supposed to be.
Oh, perfect. Now, what a way to close out. This is Alex Del Sordo with another Coaches Yelling, episode 15. I hope you enjoyed watching, and more from us here coming up, episode 16 next week. Thanks for watching.
I had the opportunity to watch Jamie Coben and Akil Abdullah race when I was like 10 years old or like 9 years old. And I think, to me, I was like, those guys were as cool as Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen,
It's good to know you were 9. I was training with Akil, so great. I was alongside him, and, now at 41.
And Luke,
I participated. I participated at the Olympics. It's true. I was a participant. They need someone to finish soundly in the middle to the bottom of the pack at every level, every event. The show, the Olympics, you name it. That's my role. It's what I do. I'm so good at it.